year. This probably pushes it back towards closer to the middle of the year before the Fed is confident enough to cut interest rates.
Thanks so much, Julia. Economist Julia Coronado is also a professor at the University of Texas, Austin. Again, the strength here could delay any lowering of interest rates in the new year, but moves in the market this morning are not wild in reaction. The 10-year interest rate is up slightly, 4.22%. Dow and S&P futures are both down about 0.2%.
Listen to the new mini-season now.
This month for our Econ Extra Credit Project, we're learning about inequality, insider trading, and cornering markets from not a documentary but a holiday comedy from 1993. It's Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, in which two tycoons make a bet about what happens if you take away the privilege of an entitled twit versus what happens if you give those privileges to a street hustler. The movie makes the point that wealth can turn people into jerks. There is real-world research on that point. Paul Piff is a professor of psychological science at the University of California, Irvine. Professor, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me on. Great to be here.
You and I here have talked before about your famous rigged Monopoly game study that you have tested far and wide. Game of Monopoly, contestants know the game is completely rigged in favor of one of them after a coin flip, but the winners think it's not the coin flip, but their own awesomeness that leads to success in the game. But lesser known is this other thing that you've done. It was your analysis of cars endangering pedestrians. How did you set that up?
We just were interested in whether drivers of different kinds of cars, drivers from different kinds of wealth backgrounds, would behave differently in terms of abiding by California vehicle code. Are they more or less likely to break the law? One of the versions of those studies, we actually posed a pedestrian at a crosswalk and secretly monitored whether drivers would stop for that pedestrian. What we found is that as the expensiveness of the car that you drove increased, the less likely you were to stop for the pedestrian. So the more likely you were to break the law.
What conclusions do you reach from seeing that data?
Yeah, so I think it's hard to draw clear conclusions from any single study. But at this point, we've got dozens of different studies looking at different facets of behavior that tell us that the more wealth you have, the less attentive to other people you become. And so what I think we're measuring in that car study may simply just be that if you come from greater means, if you have more wealth, you're just a little more focused on your own goals and interests, your own needs, what you yourself want to do, and you're a little less attentive to other people around you.
I mean, but this is an important point that you're making, which is that this one study grabbed our attention, but it fits into a matrix of other data suggesting a similar conclusion.
It'd be one thing to make these kinds of general ascriptions that wealthy people are just like that. And after all, you have to be a person who has those kinds of values to become wealthy in the first place, right? You could make that argument that it's self-interested people that become wealthy and accrue wealth in the first place. But we've run experiments in the lab where we actually, like the Trading Places experiment, we actually bring rich and poor people into the lab and manipulate them into feeling like they're somewhat wealthier or somewhat less well off than someone else. And even that very temporary, fleeting experience of relative advantage or relative disadvantage makes people actually shift in their social values and shift in the kinds of behaviors they exhibit toward other people, making even poor people feel temporarily richer, temporarily more advantaged than someone else, actually shifts them into more greedy patterns of behavior.
Paul Piff, professor of psychological science, University of California, Irvine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
We'll also discuss the problem of addressing inequality when people tend to downplay the role of luck in their success. That's clickable on the Marketplace homepage. And you're invited to our Econ Extra Credit newsletter, full of, we hope, teachable moments drawn from movies. Sign up free at marketplace.org/newsletters. Also note that Trading Places is not for everyone. What you may have seen on TV in the old days may not have had the offensive language and nudity that are in the uncut versions that stream now. Our executive producer is Kelly Silvera. Our digital producer is Dylan Mietinen. Our engineers are Jessen Duhler and Brian Allison. In New York, I'm David Brancaccio. It's Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. ViStar Credit Union and 121 Financial Credit Union, two of Jacksonville's credit unions, are now coming together, all to better serve our members and give back to Jacksonville, the city we call home. Learn more at ViStar121merger.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
It's the biggest stories of the week. Victims of a racist mass shooting sue the store where it happened and the family of the killer. A St. Johns County commissioner is censured. 2 restaurants are sued over sex offenders and super caffeinated drinks. Injuries and insurance fraud plague the Jaguars. I'm Ann Schindler, and just ahead this hour, our First Coast Connect Week in Review. Then, 23 songs we loved in 2023. Give us a call at 549-2937 or send an email to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also message us on Facebook and Instagram or tag us on X at FCC On Air. Join our conversation. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
And good morning. It's a minute after 9 o'clock. I'm Michelle Coram. This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Sarasota School Board member Bridget Ziegler is facing calls to resign. As Carrie Sheridan reports, 2 board members say the media spotlight on her has become a distraction.
A conservative proponent of so-called parental rights in education, known by critics as the Don't Say Gay law, Ziegler has admitted she engaged in 3-way sex with her husband and another woman. Board member Tom Edwards, the only moderate on the board, says she must step down.
I wanted to be very clear. I'm not judging what people do in the privacy of their own homes, but the distraction that she brings to the school board prior to this and now this is not sustainable. It has to go away.
The woman she was sexually involved with has accused Bridget's husband, Christian Ziegler, of sexual assault. Police are still investigating. Chair Karen Rose, a one-time ally of Ziegler's, also says it's time for her to go. Rose says she'll call for a vote at Tuesday's school board meeting. I'm Carrie Sheridan in Sarasota.
In Florida, this year has been a tale of 2 states as far as rainfall totals, with the southeast coast deluged by sometimes record rainfall, and much of the Gulf Coast facing a major precipitation deficit. Counties up and down Florida's west side are under new water use restrictions, especially in the Cape Coral area, where the water table has gotten so low that wells are threatened. And now Florida's wettest season is over until late spring. The National Weather Service says in Miami says the main driver of the divide was a weaker than typical high-pressure system this summer over the western Atlantic Ocean. It's 56 degrees. We have some clouds here in Jacksonville, upper 60s this afternoon.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Opinions expressed on the First Coast Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not necessarily reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and you're listening to First Coast Connect. It's Friday, so that means it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. Among our topics, the families of victims in the Dollar General massacre file a wrongful death suit. St. John's lawmakers censure one of their own. Local restaurants face criticism for everything from hiring sex offenders to highly caffeinated lemonade. The Jags deal with top-level injuries and internal fraud, and questions about leadership at the city's housing authority. Also later, 23 songs we love in 2023. But first, a look at the week's headlines with my team of local news hounds. Ben Becker, anchor and investigative reporter at Action News. Welcome, Ben.
Good morning, Ann. I'm battling a case of the sniffles, so I'll push through.
All right. Well, there's Kleenex right by you.
Thank you.
Nikisha Williams, author, podcast producer, and Jacksonville Today columnist. Welcome, Nikisha.
Good morning. Good morning, Jacksonville.
Dan Scanlon, reporter with WJCT News.
Good morning.
Dan the Man. And Taylor Levesque, multimedia journalist at First Coast News. Welcome, Taylor. Thanks for coming back. We also invite you to join the conversation. Give us a call at 549-2937. Email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or tag us on X at FCC On Air. You can also watch our video stream right now on Facebook and the WJCT YouTube page. Everybody sit up straight. Topic 1. So the family of 3 victims murdered in a racist mass shooting filed a 91-page wrongful death lawsuit Tuesday. It named, actually Monday, I think they held a press conference Tuesday, but it names as defendants the store's landlord and the security contractor, as well as the family of the killer. Nikisha Williams, this lawsuit was not entirely unexpected.
It's not, because after your loved ones are killed in a racist motivated shooting, and then the person responsible for that heinous act then kills themselves, what is left for justice? And so there is no criminal proceeding to pursue. There is only the civil route, and who can you hold responsible but the workplace, or the business rather, where the people were killed, as well as the family of the shooter who knew their loved one had racist tendencies, racist thoughts, was a gun enthusiast, all of the things really, and did not report anything, maybe did not stop that person from accessing weapons. Like, it's not a surprise, and it's the least that the families of those who lost their loved ones in the shooting can do to get some semblance of justice. It's not going to bring peace, it's not going to bring closure, but it's something, and that's the least that they can do.
Ben Becker, the suit basically says the store didn't do enough to protect customers and employees. And just as a reminder, A.J. Laguerre Jr. was a store clerk. He was 19 years old, was killed in that shooting. Angela Carr, who was 53, was an Uber driver. She was parked outside the store. And Gerald Gallion, who is 29 years old, was a customer. They were all shot and killed August 26th.
To Nikisha's point, it's hard to get justice out of a situation like this. I would suspect ultimately, despite everything, there will end up being a settlement in the case, especially from the business perspective. There'll be a hefty payout, like often in these cases, no admission of wrongdoing, and it'll be life-changing money for the family, but it won't change their life, if you know what I mean. And ultimately, that's what will happen. As far as the family goes, I'm not sure how that would play out. They could get a civil judgment, but collecting those civil judgments can be difficult as well, especially if they don't have a lot of money. So ultimately, I think with the business, certainly a settlement is what we're going to see in this case.
Dan, what is the expectation of a safe environment in this age of mass shootings and public places? I mean, clearly these create a lot of potential liability for any grocery store, any concert venue, schools, certainly. They're all places we've seen enormous loss of life due to gun violence.
Well, I was at that news conference because I needed Mr. Crump for a later lawsuit issue. It was a brutal 45 minutes listening to the family. As to security in stores, I think we're all very used to now seeing at least a security guard in some places in certain stores. We're certainly aware that if we're in a larger store, there is private security or undercover near us. So that's not unexpected in this day. But the point that Crump and others made is if there had been a security guard there in a neighborhood that is known for violence, that's where the police put their first shot spotter systems near Edward Waters, you would think security would have been in there just to prevent shoplifting and just some minor stuff. Whether that person would have been armed, whether that person would have been able to respond before this guy with the swastika labeled, automatic weapon did fire, I don't know. Maybe after the first person was shot, they could have done an automatic door lock system and tried to barricade themselves inside. It's a scary thought, and one that I think we're all very used to now. We probably all walk into stores and just look around and wonder who's the security guard.
And the suit does say that the killer, was prevented, or at least deterred possibly from harming other people at 2 prior stops that day. So we do know from surveillance video and what the police have told us that he had gone by a Family Dollar, which is down the road, prior to the shooting. He'd also gone to Edward Waters University, where he was approached, we know, by a security guard and then quickly left. Taylor, what's the sense that, they say if you see something, say something, and surely that happened at the Edward Waters University. I believe it was students who notified the security guard, but someone who's determined to commit a crime like this presumably will eventually find a porous and kind of penetrable security.
And it's sad. I think that's something that they, especially in the lawsuit, laid out clear, that because there were no security guards at this store, and that it was clear that employees had been asking for security guards or some type of security because of the danger of crime in that area. I think it shows that it was opportunistic, but also that there is a liability for Dollar General in that their employees were asking. And we've spoken to, as First Coast News employees, who say they were asking for security and that this could have been prevented.
And Taylor, you've done a lot of reporting. I mean, one of the things that the lawsuit, as Nikisha pointed out, it doesn't just target the store and the security apparatus, but it also targets the killer's family, saying that they had failed to take precautions that were reasonably necessary to protect the general public from what they called reasonably foreseeable criminal acts. You've done a lot of reporting about what we know about the killer's state of mind and possible mental health, what we heard on the 911 call. Tell us a little bit about that and how that plays into this lawsuit's claims.
Well, in the lawsuit, there were pictures of inside the killer's bedroom, and it showed there were a lot of alcohol bottles, medication bottles, there were even books that were all about weapons. And so the argument is, did his parents know that he was a threat to the public? Do they have that responsibility? Yes, he's 21. Yes, he's an adult, but he's still living in their home. The lawsuit says they had that responsibility of protecting the public from him. And did they know that he had all these things in his bedroom, that he was as big of a threat that he came out to be? So that's the argument, and that's from our research of trying to figure out, did they know to that extent? And in that 911 call from his dad, you could hear him kind of in shock that he didn't know the extent of what his son was doing in his bedroom. So I think that also on that 911 call, they were finding out a lot of things along with the dispatchers.
Those photographs were revealing in that lawsuit. I mean, it was our first glimpse into this killer's room and a little bit into his mindset. As you said, there was tons of liquor bottles, but there was also books about guns, a lot of books about guns, some disturbing photos. He had a photograph of one of the Columbine shooters, Eric Harris, that was superimposed over the picture of a dead Syrian child, presumably from that conflict. What do you take from that, Ben, in terms of, that window into this troubled person, this obviously hate-filled person, as we've been told?
Well, it appears it was entirely preventable, is what it is. And it didn't happen. And we see it time and time again with mass shootings. There are warning signs, and they're ignored for whatever reason. And people are able to get guns, and they're able to execute what they want to do. And, it goes back to, if you see something, say something. And it happens time and time again. And you wonder, especially in situations where people are in a home with others, whether it's parents or whatever, where are they in these situations? How do they not see the warning signs? Are they just turning a blind eye, or they're just really clueless about what's going on? And that's really what is the heartbreaking part of this, because these are, if not all, many of them are preventable.
To our listeners, we just remind you, or we welcome you to join the conversation. Give us a call at 549-2937 or email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Nikisha, at the press conference, family members talked about suing as a tool to deliver justice, and you touched on that a little bit. One thing that I thought was interesting, though, is that the attorney for the family said that suing the parents would give them an opportunity to sort of access information about what they knew, when they knew it, what their life was like, what his life was like. And I thought that was interesting. So he's saying that it's what we need, quote, to get to the bottom of what's happening in terms of young white men being radicalized like this.
It is a tool, and it's a way to understand why. And it's why some people don't call it the criminal justice system. They say it's the criminal legal system, because the legal system is an apparatus that allows you to use the law to your advantage to find out information. So through the process of suing, I'm assuming there are going to be depositions of the family of the shooter. And so through that process, through the discovery process that will be used to gather evidence if there's not a settlement and it does go to trial, or even before a settlement is even announced, all of that gathering of information will allow the families of the victims to really find out whatever it is that they need to know to understand how this man was able to perhaps fly under the radar of even the people he lived with, his parents, and amass weapons and become indoctrinated by hate and racist and white supremacist and anti-Semitic ideas, and what that environment was like, and whether or not his own family fostered that environment or encouraged it or has that same mindset. And I'm not saying that they do. I'm just saying it's an opportunity to discover that. And again, it's not going to bring back the 3 people who died. It's not going to bring them closure. Money does make a lot of things easier, but even that is not going to repair the wounds that they have from knowing that their loved ones were killed when they didn't have to be. And it goes back to what you talk about, an expectation of safety. I don't think there is an expectation of safety any place in America that is severely over-weaponized, where we see shootings like this of this manner all the time, and it's become normalized, and I think that's a bigger problem.
And trying to figure that out. I know that Gerald Galleon's mother, Carol Gibbs, Dan, at the press conference said that she feels like this all starts at home.
Right. My thought exactly, to jump off what she said here, is kids, we heard kids are born being friends with each other. It's the environment where they learn. I'll be intrigued to hear if, as with many adult kids who have issues, they had barred access to anybody else to their rooms. If the parents truly could not get in there, truly did not know what was on the wall because he or she keeps the door locked. That will intrigue me. But that said, the parents must have had some beliefs, at least that's the implication here, that were then fed and grown by the shooter who then did what he did. And again, the diatribes that he wrote that the sheriffs and feds are not releasing to the media or public could open a whole new wealth of information as to what his deeper thoughts were.
We've got a comment on Facebook from Scott Shine. He says, right, a Dollar General that may have had 2 employees in the store needs to have a full-time armed security. Let's get a reality check. The people in that community have a hard time even affording the products sold in that store. Frivolous lawsuits are bad for the public, and none of this will stop a crazy like this one. Your thoughts, Ben?
Well, I don't think it's frivolous. I think in any situation like this, you're going to have a lawsuit, right? Because you want to be able to have accountability. And what that accountability looks like can vary. You can get that civil judgment. If it's a civil case, you can get, if it's a criminal case, then someone goes to prison. And in something like this, you want to be able to know what led up to it, right? You want to know how we got to that point. And Keisha mentioned it, right? In discovery, we'll find out a lot of things. The family will find out a lot of things. And if anything else, or at least part of it is, you do get the closure to it. And there is accountability, excuse me. There is accountability for the, I told you I was battling something here. But the Dollar General has to be able to answer to it. And that's why you have a lawsuit. And as I said before, you'll have a settlement probably in this case, because it most likely these type of things don't go to trial, and they will make a payout, but they won't admit liability. And that's my guess. And that's the unfortunate part of these things, to be able to get them done. If you go to trial, then a lot of things could be off the table. So this is a process that has to happen, because it's a process that exists to be able to create that accountability.
And Taylor, amid all of the terrible news on this mass shooting, there is some news about this relief fund that was created to help the community in the wake of this tragedy. $250,000, money that's going to go in $15,000 increments to local groups like families of slain children, grassroots organizations there. Any of the qualifying agencies really have to focus on things like mental health, community healing, and food security. But it is an opportunity for at least some investment and possibly some small piece of good to come from this terrible incident.
Yeah, and I think since the closure of that store, that area has become a food desert. Some people don't necessarily have good transportation to get to other places. So I think it is kind of putting that back into the community to serve that area and those people that don't have access to the necessities that other areas don't have.
We're going to move on now to an issue that rose up out of St. Johns County this week, the politics of development taking center stage after an elected official was calling out the action or inaction of her colleagues. Commissioner Krista Joseph, who ran on an anti-development platform in the fastest growing county in Florida, won, but is often a voice in the county's rapidly diminishing wilderness. Dan Brown, you covered this story. What did Krista have to say? Actually, let's hear a little bit of what she has to say, and then I'll come back to you.
If you're sick of the traffic, clear cutting of the trees, high density housing, approval of more housing, children overcrowded in the schools, living in modular classrooms and really trying to learn, breaking zoning height rules on the beach, feel you aren't listened to, developers are controlling the boards, no response for your emails. You know what? There's hope. Less than 9 months. We have an election. Here's the information.
Yes, Commissioner Dean, I think this is out of line. Commissioner, yes.
Wait a minute.
Mr. Megan.
We have a point of order, so please stop speaking.
Can she make a political speech during an official county commission meeting?
Dan Scanlon, what's happening there?
Well, that is Krista speaking her mind, and she's waving an American flag as she does this initially, and then she's holding up what appears to be a print of the elections office front page to show this is where you can go to register to vote, and that is right on the other side of the podium is Henry Dean, another commissioner who's bringing up this issue, and who ultimately this week filed for the vote for censure for her. When I called the commissioner on Tuesday, she said the whole thing was weird. She was not crossing the line. She says she said at this week's meeting, she had already approached people and said, I'm going to talk about this. All she was doing was saying, there is an election coming up in 9 months. There's 3 open seats. None of you have refiled for your seat, so go vote. She was also the lone no vote in October for a very controversial approval of zoning changes to allow the Ponte Vedra Inn and Club to build a lot bigger stuff, a lot taller stuff, a lot closer to Ponte Vedra Boulevard, et cetera. And so I think she feels this is retribution for that and other stances against development.
What do you think, Ben? Did she cross a line there?
Well, first off, the dynamics of St. Johns County are bonkers, okay? You have 5 people in that commission. 4 are on one side, then you have Joseph on the other. Their situation goes back months. They've been going at it on a lot of different things. There was one instance during a commission meeting where Joseph got after Sarah Arnold, who's another one of the commissioners, because she was bringing her dog to the offices and the dog was going to the bathroom on the carpet there, okay? Like personal attacks between these. Like this has gotten to a point where it's just beyond anything that's a political, but it's like a personal thing that's happening down there. It's a battle for the Republican Party, the heart of the Republican Party in St. Johns County right now. Joseph is on one side of the issue here with the development, the other 4 on the other side. There's people who are behind Joseph who want to be able to divide and conquer, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, but they want to split the commission and they want to be able to take it over to be able to control it in the manner they do. That's what's happening right now. And there's forces at play behind these individuals who want to be able to control this council going forward in 9 months. That's why she was making that statement on council or on the commission at that time, because there's a lot more happening here than just about development. This is a battle for the Republican Party, and there's other stuff that's happened with the Republican Party in St. John's that I can't even get into right now because we don't have enough time. But it is, if you think the Duval County City Council has issues, you ought to take a look at these guys.
So do you think that that this battle over development, pro-development, anti-development is just a proxy war for the political machinations?
It's a proxy war going on, but development is the number 1, number 2, and number 3 issue in St. Johns County. It is something that everybody talks about. It drives them nuts. You go on Racetrack Road right now. If you ever make your way down there, it used to be the sticks. Mm-hmm. Now it looks like San Jose Boulevard, or if you're driving down in Orange Park somewhere. There's everything. There's everything everywhere. There's car washes. There's moving facilities, storage facilities, gas stations. None of that stuff used to be there. Just driving the other day, 2 weeks ago, I was driving on Racetrack Road, okay, major road. I hit a deer, and the reason I hit a deer because that thing had nowhere to go anymore.
But yet there's so much development along North Racetrack Road that there are 3 Publixes within shooting distance or shouting distance of each of them.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
There's no food desert over there.
There's no food desert there. And there are 3 schools in a row in one part of Northwest St. Johns County. They're the big suburb for Duval County, and there's no industry except tourism there. So they have to build places to live and to resort to play, and that's all you've got in St. Johns County. And there are nodes where there is no place to say boo. Where the British pub is on US 1 used to be also another empty stretch, and now there's condos, offices, and everything. Left, right, top, and bottom. The owner said she can't believe the difference between when she built it and now what the pub is surrounded by.
I saw a V Pizza go in there near the airport, and I'm like, who's going to be around here? But then you look around, there's developments all popping up. That's going to be a thing in 5 years. That road is going to be jammed.
And the schools are overcrowded. The schools have to be built in larger subdivisions. So Joseph had some good points to make there about the overcrowding of certain parts.
Nikisha, I'm going to ask you, because obviously this county is very development heavy. Money has always played a really big role in the elections in St. Johns County. Most of the candidates predominantly funded by developers, and that's not necessarily an unusual story for Florida.
It's not an unusual story for Florida, but I think when you look at it from the point of view that every year we see the rankings come out about education, St. John's is the #1 county in the state of Florida for education. And you look at growth and development. We're not just talking about St. Augustine, which drives tourism because of the lore of the oldest city in the nation and all of the Spanish foundings and all of that history there. But so that combined with the strength of the education system, the tourism of St. Augustine, more families who are moving from other parts of the country to the South because of the cost of living is cheaper, it's more affordable, houses are being built to meet that demand. You have this convergence of all of these outside factors in this one small county in Florida, and you're seeing the outgrowth of those tensions in the commission meeting. So whether she was censured because of what she said or because of some political infighting for the soul of the Republican Party in St. Johns County really doesn't matter. The growth of the county is the real thing. And I think as you continue to see people flock to St. Johns County because of the education, because of the weather, because of the affordable housing, because the developers are meeting the need and the demand, whether they're coming from Jacksonville or from Jackson, Mississippi, it's going to continue to be an issue. And that developers are going to start to back candidates just shows the influence that they have. And I think it's more something to discuss within the county and the political circles of how you access funding, how you prioritize candidates and all of that. And that's something that the voters do have control over. And so what Joseph said is that you do have control over this if you want to make a difference.
Taylor, one thing that's interesting to me about the debate that sort of presaged this censure issue and her outspokenness was this development in Ponte Vedra, which unlike a lot of communities where you have an unwanted development, sometimes you have, a disorganized community or a disenfranchised community that's trying to weigh in against a powerful developer. Certainly a powerful developer in this case, Gate Petroleum, which is run now by our former Jacksonville mayor, John Payton. They were asking for a variance, among other things. The height limit there is 35 feet. They're basically asking for 54 feet. And then with the elevation, some locals say it's going to essentially be 64 feet. So not insubstantial. But you have a very powerful, moneyed community there organized against this development, and they still were unable to kind of defeat the development momentum. So I wonder how this will play out for the elections, given that you have a part of the county that actually, probably has deep pockets to finance candidates.
And I think especially in St. Johns County, if people are going to want something, if people have a vision and they want a development or whatever is there, they're going to put what they can and the resources they can to get it, versus the people who are against it are going to also put their resources to go against it. So I think it's just a never-ending battle of who wins in the situation of who wants this development there and who doesn't.
But yet the Ponte Vedra Advisory Board voted against this or recommended against approving this, and that is what Krista Joseph was then commenting on later. She says, Ponte Vedra Advisory Board, we don't need them. Obviously, she was being sarcastic there. Yet that said, that club has been there for, 90 some odd years? I mean, that is a legendary, maybe one of the founding clubs in the entire county.
But a much smaller footprint.
Yeah, much smaller footprint when it started. But obviously, Gate did its homework. They presented quite a well-defined presentation at that meeting with John Payton himself speaking out.
We've got a couple of messages here. Deb emailed, 4 of our commissioners in St. Johns County are totally ignoring the will of the people. They are catering to the redevelopment industry. We are tired of the gridlock, and our quality of life is diminishing. Krista is the only commissioner representing us. Also a message from Rich on Facebook. Overdevelopment is a huge problem in the area. Clay County is also under siege by developers. They are an invasive species that needs to be encouraged to leave.
You looking at me?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, people are pissed about it. I mean, absolutely. If you go anywhere around in St. Johns County or anywhere else, they always complain about the development, but then at the same time, it's like, wait a minute, you moved here, we moved here, so we're kind of part of the problem too, right? It's okay for me to be here, but now you can't come here. But the problem's not going away as long as St. John's is a desirable location. Nikisha talked about it, #1 school district in Florida, things like that. But as more people move to St. Johns County, it may not stay that way. The schools, when it goes from a classroom of, let's say, 18 kids to 20 kids, 22 kids. I'm a product of the Baltimore City public school system, and we had like 30 kids in a class with one teacher. Okay, that's where we're headed. If the development continues and people keep moving here, you have that kind of ratio in a classroom. You don't get the same kind of education.
We're going to move on now. A couple of restaurants caught in the issue of corporate liability. We've got 2 local fast food restaurants this week. Very different issues, but sort of the same concerns. Panera was sued over its supercharged caffeinated lemonade after a Fleming Island man died after drinking multiple servings. It's the second such death being blamed on this beverage. And then in Jacksonville, the Airport Road Zaxby's is being sued after 2 former teen employees say they were physically assaulted and sexually harassed by a store manager who is a registered sex offender. He was subsequently arrested and is no longer employed there. But Taylor, you worked on this Zaxby's lawsuit. It makes some really remarkable allegations.
Yeah, this lawsuit names both the store's manager and the assistant manager, who are both registered sex offenders. The 2 teenage employees that filed the lawsuit or made the complaints are suing Zaxby's for negligence for hiring them. They're saying that it basically names the manager as the person who's doing the wrongdoing. It doesn't actually say that the assistant manager did anything towards these minor employees, but it says at this specific location, there were at least 10 female employees who were all minors. And the manager is accused of physically assaulting them, following them into the bathroom and recording them, taking their phones from them, asking them for their passcodes, touching them inappropriately. He was arrested in August for doing this right on the spot at the restaurant. But it also says that the assistant manager, him being a registered sex offender too, was employed for another 2 months after the manager was arrested. So the argument is, did Zaxby's know that the manager was a registered sex offender? I went on their website and looked at the application. You don't have to put anything in there about your criminal history. You don't have to disclose anything. We do know the assistant manager was employed there on a work release program, so it can be assumed that Zaxby's knew his situation. But what about this manager who was arrested for touching these girls inappropriately and making actions against them?
And that's kind of an interesting dilemma because there has been a lot of push recently to, I think they call it ban the box, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that people are not necessarily forced to disclose at the outset their criminal history, so that people who are returning offenders can get jobs and not be chronically unemployed after they leave prison. But it does create a conundrum if you're dealing with, maybe somebody that both of these, the manager and the assistant manager, were both convicted of crimes against young people under the age of 16. These women were very young themselves. Nikisha, what's the expectation that there might be some sort of supervision for people in that role?
This is you really hit the nail on the head. I've talked about, the prison abolition movement before. And so this is one of the issues within the movement, just me coming from the background of journalism, that I'm like, hey, this is a sticky issue when you want to talk about, returning citizens and them having the full access of their humanity and the citizenship that they should, and to ban the box. But when you have people who are convicted of, sexually violent offenses, there has to be some measure of protection and safety for the community beyond whatever you want to call community protection and safety, because that's still a very nebulous term. And so I do think that there does need to be maybe another tier of supervision of what employers can and should ask about a person's criminal history if they have one. And so I don't know if ban the box applies, for me, in just my own thinking, applies to all offenses, because something like this can happen and you have an expectation as an employee and as a parent of a minor who is allowing your child to work that they're going to be safe in their work environment from being sexually assaulted or harassed. And so there does need to be a level of security that's provided. So if it's ban the box for violent offenses but not sexual offenses, or is there a law that's created that says that you can have the box but then you don't discriminate against someone for their criminal history? I mean, everyone has to use their judgment here, and there's no easy way to do that without trying to sound like you want to be discriminatory or you're in favor of prisons or caging or warehousing humans. But there also needs to be a level of safety, and so that's a very real issue that needs to be discussed, and there has been no consensus on that within the movement space, at least.
We should say too that this has not been litigated yet. The company that owns Zaxby's, SNR Foods, issued a statement saying that they care about the safety and well-being of their employees. They take the allegations very seriously. They're aware of the lawsuit. The manager named in it is no longer employed, and they couldn't comment any further. Ben, I'm a little surprised that this made it to the filing stage. It almost seems to me like a claim that probably would get settled rather quickly, just so that it doesn't tarnish anyone's reputation.
Listen, I'm not an attorney, and let's play on the radio. You could try to legislate your way out of this problem, but I just don't know how, right? Because you ban the box, so you don't allow it, but then maybe you allow it in certain circumstances. Well, then how do you determine which circumstances and for which offenses? And then if you try to do that, then I'm sure folks like the ACLU will get involved and say, well, you can't do that. So I'm not really sure what the answer is, other than if you do your own due diligence, like Dan over here, he's pulling up sex offenders on his iPhone.
Well, and I'm used to doing that, so any HR director can just look up FDLE's sex offender search site, and there's Andre D. Clements right there. It's easy peasy. Even if you don't use that as a check the box, you'd at least want to sit down with the prospective employee and go, is this going to be an issue?
But here's my question. Would you be allowed to do that? Are you allowed to, as an employer, to be able to pull up my history and ask me about something like that?
I'm not an attorney either. I'm not an HR director, but it's easy to find. Anyone can go search and find out background information on any of us.
Right, you could.
Let's move on to the Panera case just so we get to it. So in this case, the gentleman in question, Taylor, had perhaps a kind of learning disability. He also had a heart condition and studiously avoided caffeinated beverages. Apparently only drank like water and root beer. But in this case, he went to a Panera. He drank, they say, possibly 3 cups of this supercharged lemonade, each of which carries 400 milligrams of caffeine. That's about 4 cups of coffee, what the FDA recommends as a limit per day. And he had 3 of them. So what is a store like that doing to either notify their customers about a quantity like this? This is the second death that's attributed in a lawsuit to the supercharged lemonade.
Well, I think that's the argument is, should Panera be putting a sign that this drink has that much caffeine in it? Again, I think the medically recommended dose of caffeine is like 400 milligrams, and this has between 260 and 360 milligrams, I think.
I believe it sounds like they've maybe lowered the level of caffeine since these lawsuits. Initially, it was like around 390 milligrams, and now it's like 260 or something.
Yeah,
like
now
that.
they put a range on it, but that's the argument is this lemonade is right next to all the other lemonades where their fountain drinks are, and that there apparently isn't a sign warning that it has all this caffeine. And I think it said in the lawsuit that the man who died had high blood pressure, and that's why he stayed away from caffeine. And he died walking home. That's what it says. So I think that's the argument of what they're trying to make, is that this either should be put behind the counter, which I think was done after the first lawsuit was filed with the 21-year-old girl that had passed away first. But is every Panera location doing that, and should they be doing that?
So Jennifer Temple, she's a nutrition health researcher. She spoke to NPR about this issue yesterday. Let's just hear a little of what she had to say about it.
one of the unique things about this case is that typically beverages with very high levels of caffeine, like energy drinks, are sold in discrete packaging that are clearly labeled. And the lemonades were out with all the other drinks and they were able to be refilled over and over again. So it would be difficult for somebody to know exactly how much caffeine they've consumed. And the other thing that's a little bit insidious about this is that lemonade is not something that people would expect to have caffeine. So they may refill it over and over again, not even knowing it had caffeine or not even thinking it had caffeine.
So Nikisha, if you go to the 7-Eleven and you want to buy one of those 5-hour energies, it's like in a thimble, right? You know you're dealing with a high intense caffeinated substance.
Yeah, and I'm a person who doesn't drink coffee. I don't drink soda, so I don't ingest a lot of caffeine. And I had a Panera supercharged lemonade, and I think it says on the sign it's supercharged, but if you don't ask what that means, you really don't know. It doesn't explicitly say that it's a caffeinated drink. It doesn't explicitly say how much caffeine you're ingesting. And I think I had one and I was like, oh, like my body was like, what are we doing? Like, we don't do this. So I can imagine how scary it is for someone, because it does taste good, but it's also, I mean, it really does affect you. And if you're not really in tune with your ingesting a substance that you don't normally have and how it's affecting your body, and you have, you know, prior conditions, that's going to be dangerous. And so the onus is on the Panera stores to make sure that it doesn't just say supercharged, it says supercharged caffeinated lemonade. And then under it, when you give the calorie count, you also give, you know, like the daily value of how much caffeine that you're going to be ingesting in this drink. That's not too hard to do. And like, just do that and be more diligent about your products.
And the equivalence is sometimes not something everybody knows, right? So if I say 400 milligrams caffeine, you may not know that translates to 4 cups of coffee.
And for those of us who have grandkids or kids who bring them into these places to eat and drink, and you're crazy, it's busy, and you're not looking, I can only envision what the effect of 1 cup of this would do on our 7-year-old grandson. All right, I'm not talking health. I'm just talking, wow, calm down.
Right on. We're going to move on to the Jaguars now. Not such a great week, Ben, for the Jaguars. It started off with an injury to quarterback Trevor Lawrence with their unfortunate loss in Monday Night Football Spotlight. And then midweek revelations about what appears to be a pretty enormous ripoff of the team by a trusted senior employee.
Yeah, first off, I'm glad that Trevor's recovered from his near-fatal high ankle sprain.
All right, Ben.
Well, I mean, good grief. You would have thought he got run over by the golf cart, not that the golf cart didn't take him to the locker room. I mean, it gives you an indication of how much Trevor, as the quarterback of the Jags and this city, are connected, right? I don't think there's another team and quarterback in the league that are as connected and kind of resemble each other in a way than Trevor and Jacksonville. You know, kind of the humble background, works hard, all that sort of thing. And I think there's a real, genuine connection between the two. And we saw that, right? And it happened on Monday Night Football with everybody watching, the whole country watching. And then it was so dramatic. He got up, and then he collapses to the ground. He punches the turf. You hear an audible gasp from the crowd.
Throws his helmet.
Yeah, throws his helmet. My gosh, I mean, you would have thought there was a grassy knoll and a school and a library with triangulation of crossfire or something. But he survived. He's okay, and that's the good news. Now, on the flip side, later in the week, as you mentioned, Ann, the Jags has some bad news, and the issue there is a former employee got busted by the feds for allegedly stealing. I think he admitted to it now. $22 million from the team. Stole $22 million from Shad. Not a good move. So he was buying cars, he was buying luxury condos, buying $95,000 Rolexes, and according to some local reporting, now apparently to make ends meet, he's an Uber driver driving around in a Tesla. Did I cover it all?
Is that a plug?
Did I cover it all?
I think you did.
Right?
Driving people to and from the game.
Right. And what I'd like to know is, I'm curious what the conversations are like between Shad and team president Mark Lamping about this, because he's the head of the business side of things. So I'm curious I'd like to be a fly on the wall when Shad asked Lamping about what happened with all this and how it unfolded.
I just want to say one thing that's interesting. I mean, according to what his attorney says, that this was a crippling debt that he acquired from sports gambling in part.
Well, there's something online where he gambled at Hard Rock 10 years ago down in Hollywood. He won like $7,500 playing poker. If you go online, you'll see that he actually won some money. but clearly it hasn't gone
He's
well
not
since
good
then.
at it.
No, he's not good at it. Nope.
It's hard to stay good at gambling, let's be honest.
There's a reason why they have big hotels that are really nice and there's no clocks inside. There's a reason why it's like that.
I want to touch on some drama that was happening at the Housing Authority this week. First, the Mayor Donna Deegan, slammed the brakes on a proposed $60,000 pay increase for the CEO of the Housing Authority. And then soon after, local news outlets started reporting about a city investigation into the agency that's pending. All of this comes after, this agency's had some trouble over the years, Dan. It's stuff that you've covered in the past. The former CEO was, removed after some inappropriate relations with staffers. But I found that the raise alone a little eye-opening. I think others did too.
And then let's give him a little more. Was a vote that was going to happen, but then was kiboshed by City Hall.
Yeah, and so this particular agency is in charge of affordable housing, Taylor. Their job is to, create some additional, places for people to live. There's a huge backlog. What are the optics of a $60,000 a year raise? I mean, the Housing Authority says it's needed to bring his salary up to par with others in his position.
Well, I read that there's 98,000 people on the waiting list for low-income housing. So obviously we have a shortage in people that really need those resources. I mean, with that hold being put on his raise, maybe there's other things that need to be addressed before he gets a pay raise or better outcome or a better performance by him before that happens. But I think with a backlog of 98,000 people, that's a crazy number of people.
But yet he and his agency did purchase the old Franklin Arms. They're going to renovate that into low income. They bought out an old motel, a really troubled motel on Bay Meadows Road, which will also be retrofit into smaller, few hundred square foot affordable housing. So there is some pretty interesting effort. That said, also apparently there's 500 vouchers, rental vouchers that were unused. So obviously they're not reaching out to the right people who need this stuff. So there's issues there.
I mean, Ben, to be fair, other authorities in the city, independent authorities, their CEOs make, a bundle. Getting into the $300,000 range maybe isn't so unusual when you consider that.
Well, the issue isn't about how much money he's making. The issue is now that there's currently an Office of Inspector General investigation that I reported on yesterday that they delivered to the Housing Authority that now they have 10 days to respond to, which now has led to an emergency meeting on Monday to discuss what's happening. And what my source tells me, the problem there is a $2 million program for utility cards. So what happens is they issue these utility cards to participants, and they found out that 13% of the money was going to utilities, and the rest of the money was going who knows where. So the claim is, or at least the investigation is, that there's no oversight to the program. And the buck's going to stop with the CEO, and they're going to have this emergency board meeting Monday. And oh, by the way, you want some breaking news on this? I spoke to some people, and they tell me that the board members were not aware of this Inspector General investigation when it broke yesterday. They found out in the media.
Is there a sense that that's the reason that the mayor put the hold on the raise is because she was aware of this investigation?
I can't speak for the mayor's office, but if you want to add 1 + 1 and get 2, I wouldn't disagree with you.
Well, finally, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for our lightning round. I'm going to start with you, Ben Becker. Why not?
All right. Well, Jags have a big game this weekend. See if Trevor plays. And, of course, whatever happens, then they have a game next Sunday Night Football against the Baltimore Ravens, where I'll be there because this will be a game that the whole country will be watching. I'll be watching too, of course, as a Raven fan. I'm sorry, Jacksonville, but we're going to see what happens when the Jags play one of the best teams in the National Football League.
You're not going to mock anybody's injury after that, are you?
Listen, I didn't mock it. I mean, it's a very serious high ankle sprain.
Right.
Thoughts and prayers.
Nikisha.
I'm looking forward to the opening of the Spokehouse Gallery this weekend in Lakeshore, featuring local artists. Kickoff from 2 to 5 over in the Lakeshore neighborhood, and so it's sure to be a good cultural time.
Taylor Levesque.
I have not had the chance of checking out Nights of Lights yet, so that's what I'm planning on doing.
Traffic is really bad going there. Trust me.
I've heard.
Start hitchhiking tonight.
Yeah.
Dan.
Well, obviously this Wednesday coming up, Firefighter Memorial Day for the Jacksonville Fire Department. with a large number of firefighters who have died in the line of duty over all these years. And tomorrow, biggest car cruise in Jacksonville, Caffeine and Octane, 8 to 11. I'll be there at the Avenues Mall.
Ooh.
And if you know someone who's always eating chips when you're talking to them on the phone, there's an app for that. The new AI-powered app removes the sound of crunching chips from online voice chats, Zoom, or any calls with headphones. It's called Dorito Silent. And that's all for our roundtable today. Thanks so much, Nikisha Williams, Ben Becker, Dan Scanlon, Taylor Levesque, for being here.
Thank you.
Let the chips fall where they may.
We'll be right back with JM.
Congaree & Pen, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpen.com.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Personal Injury and Wrongful Death Law Firm. Serious injury cases are complex, and civil trial attorneys present the evidence juries need to see and hear. More at waynehogan.law.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer invokes the Gipper and goes after Republicans for blocking more aid to Ukraine.
Ronald Reagan would be rolling in his grave if he saw his own party let Vladimir Putin roll through Europe.
Also on the Roundup, Donald Trump says he'd be a dictator only on day one if he wins a second term, and former Speaker Kevin McCarthy announces he has no plans to seek another one. That's all next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. This year, the Jacksonville Music Experience team reviewed more than 70 songs made by Jacksonville area artists as part of JME's Local Spotlight series. They also covered the local scene with features like Songwriting School and Gearheads. But for their marquee year-end list, the JME team is sharing their 23 favorite local songs of 2023. And here to play some of the songs from that list is WJCT Arts and Culture Editor Matt Shaw. Hey, Matt.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, for
I know
sure.
you had a late night last night after a performance at the Soundstage.
Yeah, talking about local music. Yeah, we had Teal Peel, local indie rock band, do their album release here, and it was a wonderful show.
A big success.
Yeah, beautiful music. It was just a great community local music night. But just a note on how we came up with this list. You know, we did 23 songs because, 2023. We didn't do any ranking. We just said local songs that we love, no number one or anything. We didn't want to make it a competition, but we made a long list, and then I just asked our contributor group. They all listen widely. They cover the local music scene breathlessly, but just to pick songs that they really loved and that they were passionate about. So I'm going to play just a handful of those songs. First up is Bobby Kidd. If you're a fan of Snail Mail, Mitski, or the supergroup Boy Genius, Bobby Kidd is in that vein. Singer-songwriter and guitarist Anna Lester is the front person, writing really nice indie folk songs dealing with love and loss and existential questions, the important topics. But here's a song from an album they released in 2023. This is Bobby Kidd with Seeds.
Sing me to sleep, I'm afraid of the dark. Maybe if you speak, I'll just drift off. I can't be fixed by anyone else, but the sound of your voice, it just might help.
Cool. It's got kind of a hypnotic vibe about it.
Yeah. It's some down tempo, good, I feel like early morning listening or just like afternoon drive when you're just.
My producer Stacy was saying it's good for a late night driving song.
Yeah. I would agree with that for sure. Next up, this is speaking of driving, this is like a windows down kind of, it's Bright Purple. It's an R&B, pop, and hip-hop duo of Jeremy Ryan and Kaylin Peavy, who goes by Cutie. Both of these artists have solo and other side projects, but they released this song called Lala in the spring, and many of us really felt like it was like going to be the song of the summer, like Prince's The Revolution's like rival band,
right?
Yeah. It's got that kind of like
Morris Day in the time.
Yes, yeah, it's really nostalgic, sort of like late '80s production there.
Yeah, very smooth.
Yeah. Next up, Lands. This is a local music success story. I think it's a duo of Renaya Woodard, and Brian Squillis. They recorded an album here in late 2021, early 2022, then signed to Boston label Run for Cover Records, who put the album out in 2023, and they've since moved to LA, are really blowing up and touring. Here's a song from Lotus, which came out this year, that's been in heavy rotation on the independent 89.9 HD4. This is Overseas Back to You by Lands. But I think maybe like we've just run out of band names, so you just have to like start changing like capitalization.
Characters, letters, intermixing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, they're a really great band. Last but not least, Lucy Lind is a young songwriter and singer. He started the year off with an opening slot at February's Winterland Festival, then bookended his year opening for the Black Kids at Intuition a couple weeks ago. He's got an ear for melody. He's a really captivating performer, stalking the stage, jumping into the crowd, climbing on top of things in a way that makes probably the venue owner's blood pressure spike a little bit. But here's a single by Lucy Lind. It was released this year. It's called Mistakes with the Bottle.
Good stuff. That's you described that as bedroom pop.
Bedroom pop, yeah. It's like a term that was started being thrown around, maybe 5-10 years ago, around like the SoundCloud group of artists who, just you can have a studio in your bedroom, with all the technology now, and so you make music, put it up on the internet, and hope people listen to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a new day for releasing music, for sure.
It is, yeah.
Well, you can read the full list of 23 great local songs on jacksmusic.org and even find links to listen to all the songs on your preferred streaming platform. Matt Shaw, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's our program. If you missed anything, you can check out the rebroadcast at 8 p.m. or find it at WJCT.org or on your favorite podcast platform. Our executive producer is David Luckin. Our producer is Stacey Bennett. Kathy Waterman is our associate producer, and the show is directed by Brady Coram. Don't forget to join us Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m. for What's Health Got to Do with It, when Mayo neurologist Dr. Joe Servin explores the science of sleep. Join us again Monday for when one interfaith group talks about their strategy to end gun violence in Jacksonville. I'm Ann Schindler, and you've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
It's falling and sinking, but darling, I think that you'll learn. All of those nights that you stayed left you warm when it rained, and I know that you're so up in your flame, you're so done with the way.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT.